Well, started music when I was about 6 years old. My father was a music teacher in high school, school band director, and he played the trumpet. So I started on the trumpet, then I went to the recorder. I wanted to play the saxophone, so the music teacher at the school where I was said, well, you know, all the saxophone players start in the clarinet. So I started in the clarinet, but I didn't like the clarinet very much, and I was not very good at it. And one day my father brought home a flute from my mother because my mother wanted to play the flute.
Oh.
So, and you know, she was trying on her own and she had difficulty producing sound. So one day I said, oh, let me just try it. And I picked up the flute and I was able to make a sound right away, which frustrated my mother. But then I thought, this is not such a hard instrument. And I started playing the flute. I was still playing saxophone in the high school jazz band, but I started also taking flute lessons. And at some point, my flute teacher said, you know, you probably should decide whether you want to play the flute or the saxophone, because the saxophone, you have the embouchure in your mouth, and it's very different from playing the flute. And so at some point, probably when I left high school, I decided to concentrate on the flute. So I started a little bit by accident. It's not somebody I had heard that I thought, oh, I want to play like this. And as a matter of fact, I think it took me about 2 years after I started playing the flute until I heard a recording. And I remember it was Jean-Pierre playing a Mozart sonata. And so that was a revelation. And then in my hometown, it was a small town, there was an amateur orchestra, and my father played trumpet in that amateur orchestra. And they always had trouble finding flute players. And my father said, you know, if the flute is a pretty rare instrument, I think if you persist on the flute, you'll be able to find work, because not many people play the flute. So I started playing in the amateur orchestra, and I started taking lessons. I lived in a town that was about an hour and a half south of Montreal, and I would take the bus on Saturday morning and go take flute lessons in Montreal. And what's interesting is that the flute teacher at the conservatory had been in school, because my father went to that conservatory as a student. They were both classmates, so he knew him, and he said, you know, this man is a wonderful teacher. And he was. He said, you know, you should take lessons with him. So every Saturday, I would go take the bus, take the lesson, and come back. And then once I finished high school, I went there full time. And I was there for, I think, 4 years after high school, until I graduated. And in the summer, I would go to a summer camp that was half an hour from my hometown, called Orford. And my father had gone there as a student. It started in the early 50s, so it's almost 70 years old. So I went there for 3 summers. And I met students from all over the place. It was a jeunesse musicale organization, so there were teachers coming from Europe, students coming from all the French-speaking countries, you know, Switzerland, France, a number of different countries. And there was a girl I met there who was a flutist. She was from the northern part of Quebec, but she graduated a year before I did. And she went to Europe, I'm not sure at whose suggestion, and she went to study with Aurélien Nicolet. So during my last year in Montreal, she wrote to me and she said, you know, this is a wonderful teacher. You should, you know, maybe you should audition for his class. So she sent me all the papers. It was in Germany, so the papers were all in German. I didn't know any German, so she helped me. She translated, you know, I sent the forms. And then at the end of the school year, when I graduated, I went in the summer to take some classes, master classes in France and England. And then I auditioned in September for Aurélien Nicolet's class, and I was lucky enough to be accepted in his class. So that was, that was wonderful. And I spent 2 years with him. And then I went to Geneva to study with Maxence Larieux, who is a wonderful French flutist who's still alive. He's, let's see, he was born in 34, so he would be 85. He's going to be 85, yes. But he still plays, and a wonderful player. So it was very interesting because I traveled a lot and met a lot of people, and that's one thing about music that's so wonderful, I think, because you get to meet people, you get to travel. It's the world is really open to you, and it's not like working in an office where sometimes people say, oh, you're a musician, you're so lucky, because when we travel, we go on tour, those people are in the same job all the time, and we would love to have the chance to travel, and we do travel a lot.
Rampal came to New York, and he actually did the second concert of Lyric was 2 events he did in one day. One was a master class, and at night he performed.
Wow.
And then I had also interviewed him at the New School. I have a tape with him. We'll have to talk about that
Yes,
sometime.
I'd love to hear that. Yes.
But one question I once asked him, and I asked Galway, people said Mozart didn't like the flute, and Galway brushed it off. And Rampal went into a lengthy discussion about how the Magic Flute was written, how the flute piece was commissioned, and what happened. So it was a very profound answer as to clearly that Mozart loved the flute.
Yeah, obviously. I think what he didn't like, and he's supposed to have said, what's worse than one flute? 2 flutes. Because back then, the flute only had a few keys. It was a very imperfect instrument, and I think what he didn't like was the fact that it was out of tune. And I'm sure Mozart had a very keen ear. So it's not so much the flute, but maybe the flute players he didn't like. But I think if he had heard the great players of this last century, he would have loved it. So, and I mean, we're lucky he wrote 4 quartets for flute with strings. He wrote 3 concerti, one the flute and harp, which we did at the Lyric, which is probably one of my very favorite pieces. I mean, I could play that piece every week and I'd be happy. It's such great music. So even in his later symphonies, he wrote some very nice. But I must say, my absolute favorite repertoire to play in the orchestra are the Mozart piano concertos. The writing for all the winds, for the flute, oboe, bassoon, sometimes clarinet, a few of them, clarinet, not many. It's always a dialogue with the piano. I mean, we played one, I think it was last week, we played the C minor, the 24, and every time I play one, it doesn't matter which one, I always think, oh, this is the greatest music. I mean, it's magical.
Many people say that in his piano concertos he was developing the orchestra. He was pushing the orchestra, although most people don't understand what that really means.
You're right. I mean, because, very often in the orchestra you have blocks of sounds, that people playing together, but in his piano concertos, it's chamber music. It's the best chamber music for winds ever written.
Interesting.
I could play a different Mozart piano concerto every week, and I would be a happy person. I wouldn't need to play anything else. I mean, this is...
Let's talk a little about the instrument itself,
yes.
How it evolves.
Well, the flute started as, it was just a reed, that was growing, and the wind blowing across the reed would produce a sound. So that was the very, very beginning. I mean, and then people got the idea of putting holes in the reed to be able to play different notes. But it's a little bit the same principle as the pan flute. The pan flute, that's what it is. It's a collection of reeds put together of different lengths so that you get different sounds, and you just blow across. Or if you take, I remember when I was a kid, you would take a Coke bottle, and that's how the sound is produced. So it's a very simple, the principle of the instrument is very simple. And then in the Baroque period, they made a wooden instrument with holes and had a few keys, but the instrument that Mozart wrote for, or Bach, was that instrument. And the instrument we know now as the modern flute was invented by a jeweler, a German jeweler named Theobald Böhm, in Munich in the 1840s. I think 1842 was the date that, the official date that he came out with the instrument. And this is basically the instrument that we have today. I mean, that's the system. He's the one who devised the system with keys, with extensions. Sometimes you'll push one key and it presses another one down, because of course your finger would not be able to reach, I mean, that far. And it's so for the last 170 years almost, that hasn't changed. I mean, that's, and was the first one to make an instrument out of silver, out of metal, because before that they're all wooden. So that he really made the calculation. He devised the fingering system, which is the same system that is used on the clarinet and the saxophone. They all have the Böhm system. The oboe and bassoon are different, but so this is. I mean, basically, this instrument hasn't changed in the last 170 years.
And what's the difference between a gold flute and a metal flute in terms of the capacity to make beautiful sound?
Each metal has its own characteristic. I would say the majority of instruments are made of silver, but there are a number that are made of gold. There are fewer that are made of platinum, but silver and gold are the two most used metals for the flutes. And it really is a matter of taste. I mean, I personally like the combination of the gold and silver. That's why this part here, the head joint, is made of, this is 18 karat gold, but the rest of the body is silver. But really, it's a very personal thing. Some people only play with silver instruments, others only with gold. It's just a matter of taste. I think the difference is fairly subtle. I mean, if I were to play a gold instrument and a silver instrument, there might be a small difference, but it's really what the performer is looking for.
That would be interesting sometime.
Yeah.
Just to see the contrast.
Yeah.
And do you own many flutes?
No, not many. I have 3 flutes, but this is the one I play, I would say 90% of the time. The other ones I keep as backup in case something, needs to be repaired and I can't use it. But I've had this flute for 35 years.
Wow. And is it still a Böhm flute? Is that who manufactures it in Germany?
No. I mean, it's a Böhm system. But this one is made by Brennan Cooper in Boston. In the United States, it's interesting that most of the flute makers are either in the United States or in Japan.
Oh, interesting.
And all the flute makers in the United States are in the Boston area, because way back at the beginning of last century, there were 2 flute makers, Haynes and Powell, and they were in Boston. And at some point, some of their employees left the company and started their own company. So now there are a lot more makers, but because they were working in Boston, they all seem to have stayed in the Boston area. So that's where Boston is the mecca for the flute making in America.
What are the main characteristics that a player should have to play flute?
I don't know of any specific characters. You know, I think, you know, the person should, I mean, if the person can make a sound without too much difficulty, I think that's maybe one of the prerequisites. But otherwise, it's like learning how to play the piano or, you know, or any other instrument. I mean,
There are more than one way to use, say, your mouth and the hole.
well, you can shape, yes, you can shape your mouth to get different colors of sound. So you can, for example, you can do or you can do
Is that coming from shaping your mouth or,
Yes.
or less air?
no, it's the same amount of
Just
air.
the mouth.
That's just, yeah, different vowels or.
So there's one thing that is technique, the hands. There's other thing is inspiration, the brilliance of your voice or your
Breathing.
the way you play it.
What do you mean about the fingers then?
Now, there are people that are very good in techniques. You see.
Yes.
They are
sure.
agile. They do the very fast
Yeah.
stuff, but they don't have a good sound
Uh-huh.
because of that.
No, that's that's different. Now the sound is like your voice. I mean, everybody has his own voice, and I think to produce different kind of sounds, you first have to hear them in your head, what you want to sound like. And as a student, I think probably the most important thing is to listen to a lot of players and find somebody whose sound you like, and then you hear what are all the different types of sound out there, and say, oh, I love this, the way this person sounds. So you to get ideas, and then when you practice, you're trying to replicate what you've heard, because a lot, I mean, some of it can be taught, but I think some of them has to come from inside your head, something you're hearing.
And there's a difference between the higher notes or the bass notes, or see, for you to have it, either very bass or very high.
The bass,
Yeah.
bass note.
Well, this instrument has a range of about 3.5 octaves. So the lowest note is a B, which is just a half step below the middle C on the piano, and it goes to the very highest note is an F sharp, the last F sharp on the piano. So basically it goes from what is it? The middle C. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe see. 1 octave, 2 octaves, 3 octaves. Yes,
That one.
right. So it goes from
Wide range.
yeah, it is a wide range. I mean, the very highest notes are not used a lot, but they can be played. You know, isolated. They can be played.
And there are some music that are more difficult technically for
Yeah.
perform.
Sure.
Give me some example of that.
Or for some reason, it seems like Russian composers often write a lot of notes.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I mean, if you look at the music of Prokofiev, is very challenging. Even in the soul music, in the orchestral literature, Prokofiev, Shostakovich, are very often write very fast movements, scherzi or something, very fast movements. Yes, well, I mean, something that is very well known is the Flight of the Bumblebee by Rimsky-Korsakov, who's also Russian. He goes, and he goes like this for 2 minutes. Whereas the French composers have used, like Debussy, Ravel, have used the flute more for its colors and its mood, and something, for example, like the opening of the Mother Goose, which was originally written for, it was a piano four hands, but he also orchestrated, and it starts with a flute solo that goes like this.
It's a greater interest in lyricism rather than
Yes.
technical virtuosity.
Yeah.
But it is technically virtuosic what you just did. Implicitly.
There are some teams that all the people knows and start to be excited. Give me an example of some of those teams.
How about the Gluck?
Oh, sure.
The famous.
Yeah, the Dance of the Blessed
Yes.
Spirits. Yeah, that's a beautiful. That's something that we could do sometime for the lyric,
Oh,
just with
wonderful.
strings.
Oh,
Yeah,
wonderful.
that's a beautiful. It's the context of it is it's in the opera Orpheus and Eurydice, and in the opera when Orpheus loses Eurydice, it's not sung, it's danced by dancers. It's a pantomime, and the flute plays the solo, which goes like this.
Not only do
Well-
you play it beautifully, but you're carrying that around in your head.
Oh, yeah.
And you're not playing in an opera orchestra a lot, so
No.
that's even more impressive.
Well, it's something that, as flute player, you will play sometime in a recital or something.
You told me that you like to teach.
Yes.
What is to teach music?
I think it's many things, but maybe especially I'm lucky enough to teach students of a fairly advanced level, at the college level. I would say the most important thing is to inspire them to practice and to achieve, or for them to achieve their potential, their maximum potential. And it's, I would say it's transmitting knowledge that you've acquired over the years. And I feel that during a week, when I work with a great conductor, I feel like I'm learning something. And then you come and teach and you sort of pass that along, you share it with other people.
It's really a pleasure when you see someone, there's talent, isn't it, for a teacher?
Oh, yes. But a lot of people are talented. I think the difference is those who really work hard. Because there's so much to, it's a lifetime of learning. I'm still learning. And the students must have that desire to get better and to keep learning.
Yeah, recently the people of the orchestra here made a kind of manifestation pro the people in Chicago.
Yes.
Because the people had to pay their bills too,
Yeah.
right? And they are thinking and claiming about retirement and things like that. Can you talk a little about that?
Well, musicians contribute to a pension fund. Part of their salary every year goes to the pension fund, and also the management puts some money aside. And because of the economy in the last 10 years, maybe has been having a hard time. A lot of companies some employees in some fields have lost their pension fund or a big part of it. And there's a whole thing about the defined contribution, and I don't remember what all the terms are, but people want to have the security, if they've worked for 40 years or however many years, that when they retire, they want to be able to have a decent standard of living. And people have to fight for that, because it's so easy for governments or for companies to say, oh, we can't afford it anymore. And
You travel a lot playing. What are the places that you say, oh, that was unforgettable?
I enjoyed very much going to South America. Unfortunately, we don't go there anymore. I enjoy going to Europe. It's very interesting to play in some halls where there's been a big history. For example, the Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires is one of those places. In Vienna, the Musikverein in Vienna has such history. When you think that people like Schubert and Mendelssohn and Bruckner conducted or played in that hall, the history there is, and in a city like Vienna, all the history there is with all these famous musicians, Mozart and Beethoven and so on, it's not something that we have here. It's very, so that's why it's very inspiring to go to those places.
When you look at the period from 1780 to 90, Robbins Landon wrote a book, The Golden Years. Every month there were 2 masterpieces being written, on average, by Haydn and Mozart. and how there was a flowering of Schubert and Brahms and Wagner, all those people
Yeah.
in a short maybe 40 to 60 years.
And somebody recently was saying, we were talking about composers, and a small country like Austria has produced so many
geniuses,
composers.
and within a short,
Yeah.
relatively short period of time,
Yeah.
considering that the flute is probably 50,000 years old,
Right.
and we're not quite that old.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's true. When you see Mozart, Haydn, Schubert, and then you Bruckner, not Wagner, Mahler. I mean, it's incredible for such a small country. It's amazing.
And there are many composers around the world doing very beautiful things, including in Brazil. You have already been there more than once. Do you remember something that you heard or something that you like?
Well, I love the bossa nova, and I remember being in São Paulo and looking for asking where I could find places where I could hear it. But I mean, this music is. I don't remember when I first heard it, but somehow it struck something in me, and I just love it. And one of my favorite pieces by Tom Jobim is Desafinado. It was.
The one thing is read, the other thing is the memory. There's a lot of things that you play by memory.
Yeah.
And there are some pieces that are easy to remember.
I think some things that you've played often, it just stays with you. You don't even have to work at it. Or, I mean, you can, you can sing it to yourself and, I mean, sometimes if you want to learn a specific piece from memory, you have to go systematically and learn, a few lines at a time. But things over the years that you play or you hear, just, stay in your head.
How much preparation is there for you with the Philharmonic? You know a lot of the literature, but there's a lot of new work as well.
Yeah, well, it's not just for the Philharmonic. I have a routine, a warm-up routine that I do. I try to do every day when I'm playing. I take some vacation sometime, but when I'm working, I would say about an hour and a half to 2 hours of sound exercises, scales, some techniques, some different things. Not specifically anything I have to play, but I feel that once I do that work, then I just apply it to whatever I play.
That is your process for warm-up?
Yeah.
Like 1 hour?
Or to two.
Up to 2. I mean, I do different exercises. What I do is, if I have to go to work, I get up in the morning and I try to do, half an hour, 45 minutes. Then I have breakfast, then I drive to work because I live out of town. And then I get here, and I usually get here about 45 minutes before the beginning of a rehearsal. So then I'll practice for another 45 minutes. So that's already an hour and a half. And then maybe I'll do a little more. But it's the same thing as an athlete doing, going to the gym or doing stretching exercises, things like that, just for the body to be ready to do anything. And then they go play whatever sport they play. But you want the body to be able to respond to what
Can
you
you
want
please
to do.
show me one of the exercises that you do for warm-up?
There are tons of. I start with sound exercises, and I play through the whole register. So I start something like this. I'll try not to play too loud in your ear.
No, that's fine.
There I go. And then I go all the way down to the lowest note. And then I start on this note and I go up to the highest note. And that takes about 20 minutes for the control to play loud and soft, but play at the same pitch, not to be flat or sharp. Because that's something that wind instruments you have to work on. You don't on a string instrument or piano, but on a wind instrument you have to make sure that you control the air. So at the same time you're working on your air control, trying to hold the notes as long as possible, and over time to a little bit longer and longer, because that's the big part of playing a wind instrument.
You work with a lot of conductors.
Yeah.
Which one the one is you learn something different to open your eyes? That's possible too.
Well, it's those who inspire you to, and the whole group to play better than you can normally play, or they'll give you ideas and things like that. I don't want to name any names, but I remember there was this one conductor with whom we used to work, and I really felt every rehearsal that I was learning so much. And when the end of the dress rehearsal came on Thursday morning at 12:30, I was always sorry that the rehearsals were over. I wish we could have.
And was it just shaping a phrase? Was it tempo? What were the kinds of things that were so unusual?
Yeah, talking about phrases and how to approach the music and really inspire you to, give you ideas of on how to do things. But again, I don't think that's, some of it can be learned, but I think a lot of it has to come from within. A conductor can learn technique, how to beat 1, 2, 3, 4, but he's the one, because he's in front of 80 or 100 people, has to inspire those people by giving them, ideas of what to do. And some of them are just like traffic cop, they just beat the time, but others will, really.
So does it happen mostly in rehearsal? Because I remember watching Bernstein, he would just have his hands at his side, and the orchestra clearly was doing what it had to do and knew what it to do. Or Van Karajan going like this.
Yeah.
But it wasn't this that was important.
No, right. Yeah, you're right. It happens during rehearsals, because that's when the conductor talks or explains what he wants to do. In concert, he's just there to, coordinate everything, but the work has been done. Yeah, it's been done before. Yeah.
I got a lot of players that have other talents too, like to play chess or to paint. Which are the other talents that you have?
One thing I like to do much when I'm not working is play tennis. I love tennis.
I knew you and Joe Robinson were always playing.
Right. Yeah.
And so to take care of the body itself, it's very important, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, because playing any instrument is physical, but even more a wind instrument, because you have to be, because if there are days when you don't feel well, let's say you have a stomach ache or whatever it is, it really affects your playing. It's important to, or if you have a cold, so it's important for the body to be in shape, absolutely, because it's very physical. We spend hours a day either in rehearsal or practicing. You have to be in some sort of shape.
Do you exercise every day?
I try to. I used to run a lot until I injured my knee. Now I try to walk every day if I can. Yeah.
There's a way, you see, the music itself changed a little from 1800 to now. The way that people play how they interpret these things. What do you think is the major change?
Well, I think that the bigger change is with the composers. I mean, look at what was written in the 18th century and 19th century, and until the end of the 19th century, where Wagner went probably as far as he could in whatever direction he was, and then Schoenberg had to invent a different system because they felt that everything had been done. And in the 20th century, with Schoenberg writing the 12-tone music, it seems that everything, or what these people wrote, was much more cerebral. I mean, the music of Schoenberg and other composers who've written along those lines is often very interesting to analyze because it's mathematical. But music that was written, let's say, in the 19th century, which was more romantic, is the total opposite. It's not at all intellectual, it's much more emotional. So, I think people who play a lot of new music have a very, often a very intellectual approach to what they're playing. But when you play music of the 19th century, it's much more emotional, so I mean, we play now in the 21st century, we play music written in the 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st century. And what's interesting, I mean, sometimes the same program, you'll play in the first half, for example, I think last week we played the Brahms Overture, we played the Mozart Piano Concerto, and after intermission, we played the First Symphony by John Corigliano, which is, so in a way, you have different personalities when you play your music from one period and that's what makes it interesting, I think, that somebody who plays only a Baroque instrument like a Baroque flute or harpsichord is limited to a certain period of music. But with our instruments, we play music from 300 centuries.
And
300 years, sorry, 3 centuries.
Composers are actually looking for different sound. Mozart is looking for a different sound from Prokofiev. On the piano, for example, Prokofiev often wants a percussive, hard, ugly sound. Ugly. Based on, compared to a Mozart piano concerto. Is it true on the flute as well?
Oh yes.
With Prokofiev?
No, not with Prokofiev, although you use different sounds and different colors with Prokofiev than you do with Mozart. But it's certainly true with people that followed Prokofiev. If you think of Varese, for example, he wrote a piece for flute called Density 21.5, which is the density of the platinum, which was written for somebody who ordered a platinum flute. But it's true that in the 20th century, gradually, probably a lot of the instruments became more percussive in the writing. I mean, it's true with the piano, but I'm sure even with the string instruments, and certainly with the wind instruments.
I mean, when you look at Boulez and some of the people there, the percussion section has grown.
Oh yeah.
I personally shouldn't be on record to say that I like Schoenberg up to Verklärte Nacht. And then after that find it very interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, because after that it became more intellectual.
Right.
Yes, because I mean the early works of Schoenberg or Gurlieder, or the early works of Webern and Berg were in that, the end of the 19th century aesthetic until the switched to more the 12 tone technique and more. Yeah.
But we still have some composers in the 20th century,
Oh,
like
yes.
Irving Berlin
Yeah.
and Gershwin and Cole Porter, who carried on a tradition of beautiful melodic.
Oh, even
Writing.
even classical composers like Aaron Copland, or there are a number of them who Birdsong. I mean, we just recorded a few weeks ago because they're doing a remake of a film version of West Side Story.
Oh yes, I heard
Spielberg
about that.
is
Yes,
doing that.
and the Philharmonic's doing the soundtrack.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And we recorded some of that music, and I mean, I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's Bernstein's
I agree.
best piece.
I agree.
It's some beautiful music.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Who orchestrated it? Did he or did somebody else?
That's a good question. I don't I don't know. You
I don't know
need to ask. I'm not sure.
Music is very emotional many times.
Yes.
There are some music requiems that are very sad, that you feel sorry. And there are some that are very happy, that are very gay.
Yeah, sure.
Can you give me an example or two of that?
Well, I think the Gluck that I played earlier, that's a very sad one because that's when he loses your DJ. Let's see, happy. What could I play that's very happy?
Flight of the Bumblebee. I often say, Robert, that in one instant, going from a minor chord, just raising the third, to a major chord, you can change somebody's emotions instantly.
Yeah.
From happy to
Yeah.
sad.
Something happy. It could be something like this. It's probably.
And that's
Yeah.
Mozart.
Well, that's Mozart.
And that's the harp and flute.
No, that's
No,
the
that-
quartet.
The quartet, right, right.
Yeah.
And there are some pieces also like glorious, like Wagner and those things that you feel like, bam, there are some glory or some major event happening.
Well, I mean, sure. Something like, let's see. Often the last movement of a symphony, it could be Beethoven Ninth Symphony, as an example. With the Ode to Joy, with the chorus, and often the last movement. I mean, it could be Shostakovich, it could be Tchaikovsky, it could be Brahms, it could be Beethoven, Mozart.
There are some composers that you say, this guy, I really can't understand what he is saying.
Yeah, some of them are an acquired taste, and some of them, and that's a personal thing. For me, there may be a piece that doesn't really speak to me, but somebody else might say, "Oh, I just love this piece." That's what's interesting about music, is that a lot of things you cannot put into words. You either have a connection or a feeling, or you don't. It's like when you meet somebody, some people, you meet somebody for the first time, you feel that, yeah, there's a connection right there. And other people you don't feel like, it's, you can't explain why, it's chemistry,
There's some music that we listen and it's very easy. We can repeat it. It's very easy for you to remember. And there are some music that takes time for you to assimilate the whole idea.
Yeah. Well, for me, that was true. I remember when I first started in orchestra, there was a lot of music I had never played, certainly never played, but even never heard. Like, I was not familiar. When I was a student, I was not familiar with, let's say, the Bruckner symphonies or Mahler symphonies, because that's not something that in a student orchestra I ever played. And it took me a long time until I sort of started understanding the language and the style of the composer. And I know in specific times that has happened is when at some point I played one of those pieces with a really great conductor. And that's what a great conductor can do. And I remember, for example, one time we were playing the Faust Symphony by Liszt, which is a piece I had never played. And so for pieces I had never played, I would usually listen to a recording to find out, how the piece went and to practice it myself before the rehearsal. So I listened to this recording of the Faust Symphony and I'm thinking, this is not a very good piece. And then we come in the rehearsal and we're working with this conductor I was talking about earlier, about whom
And inspiring.
he
Inspirational.
made it sound like it was the greatest piece ever written. And that's what a great conductor can do. I mean, and it's the only time I've played that piece. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I'll ever play it again because it's not a piece that is played very often nowadays. But I mean, I still have that in my memory, what it was like. And I'm afraid that if I were to do it with somebody else, it might be a letdown because it might not be quite as, yeah.
I remember when Bernstein was really introducing the Mahler symphonies.
Uh-huh.
And I would go and hear them and think these are long and they're
Yeah.
tedious and they don't hold together
Yeah,
and
it
little
takes-
by little, people have made them hold together.
Yeah, it
And
takes,
It takes time to really understand them.
it does.
And he
Yeah.
was the pioneer.
Mhm,
He
yeah.
was really out there
Yeah.
batting for Mahler.
Yeah, it's true. I think he started in the 60s, and after Mahler died in 1911, I don't think that people played his music. And Bernstein really is the one who, even with the Vienna Philharmonic, which was the orchestra that Mahler conducted, and he started conducting them in the 60s, and I would say for the last 30, 40 years, the Mahler symphonies are, considered masterpieces. Everybody plays them, but you're right that for a period of maybe 50 years,
They were
After-
non-existent.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the same thing happened earlier in history, like when Bach died. Back then, the music the music was played when it was written by the composer. But if the composer died, then people wouldn't play his music anymore. And in the case of Bach, who died in 1750, it was Mendelssohn in Leipzig who discovered the manuscript of the St. Matthew Passion. That was, I think, in 1825. So it was
1829, I think, was
Yeah.
the first performance. I don't remember exactly.
So
I
it
could be
was
saying it wrong.
like 75 years.
Yeah.
For a period of 75 years, the music of Bach wasn't played. And then Mendelssohn is the one who brought it back to life. And since then, it has been played forever. But back then, it was only music that was written at
Current.
the time. Yeah, current. Yeah.
They did know the well-tempered clavier because Selter taught the well-tempered clavier.
Oh, yeah.
That don't mean it was necessarily performed,
Yeah.
but people
But they
knew.
knew.
And very fascinating, Mendelssohn's grandmother would buy him manuscripts of Bach.
Really?
So he was actually converted. His grandfather, Moses Mendelssohn, was an important figure in translating the Bible into Hebrew, and yet Mendelssohn was converted to Christianity. And she bought him manuscripts that were
Oh.
the content, whatever she could get her hands on,
Yeah.
it didn't matter. And there he was, bringing back the St. Matthew Passion as a Protestant convert.
Interesting.
So the background is fascinating.
Yeah.
And a great,
It really is.
obviously great musician. And there was a musician that drew and painted and
Yeah.
was multifaceted. Could we talk a little bit about the Lyric Chamber Music Society,
Sure.
of which you are an honored member and have played so beautifully for us, and hopefully we'll do anything you want. Just name it Robert,
Sure.
whatever you want.
Yeah.
But just in case Antonio put something together for Lyric.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think that now the Lyric is in its 21st.
21st
Just finished its
Yeah,
21st
yeah,
season,
yeah.
which is remarkable. I mean, I think the venue is wonderful. You know, that's part of what makes it different from other concert series, because it has such an intimate feel to it. And I think, I mean, that's how concerts started, you know, in the, what, 18th century, or in people's living rooms. And, you know, it's this kind of small community. What I find interesting in the lyric is that you can hear all sorts of different things, and things that you might not hear anywhere else. I mean, really, it's so eclectic. I remember doing some interesting chamber music. I remember one year it was the Haydn anniversary, and we did some lesser well-known chamber works by Haydn. Last year I had the pleasure of doing a concert music all by women composers. And I know sometimes you have jazz, you have all sorts of things.
Try to have a variety.
Yeah.
Or really showcase great talent.
Yeah.
And having somebody like Robert who is playing in an orchestra, we take him out of the orchestra and let him do whatever he wants.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, I remember doing this recital with Nancy Allen, flute and harp, and you know, different things of the Mozart flute and harp concerto with her also. I remember for the opening of the season one year, and you know, different. Yeah, I mean, exploring things, and I think, I mean, in my case, often playing pieces that I feel that people probably don't even know. But my criteria is always to make sure that it's good music. But I like trying to discover things that I'm always looking for things that are maybe not well known, because you know, there's so many things. I mean, it baffles me that to this day most orchestras always play the same repertoire. And sometimes I think, where is the curiosity? I mean, they should be looking for lesser known pieces by very well known composers, but that for some reason, I'll just give you an example. Dvorak has written 9 symphonies. We always play 7, 8, and 9. But what about the first 6? Schubert has written 9 symphonies. The same thing. I mean, we've done once in a while some of the early Schubert symphonies. They're masterpieces.
And 40 symphonies of Mozart. They do the G minor.
Jupiter and the 39.
Right.
Yeah.
And Haydn only 104.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Haydn is and you know, I don't know how many Haydn symphonies I've played. I haven't counted them, but I would say probably not more than 12 to 15, and there are 104 of those.
And he's I consider him one of the most undervalued composers.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit in the shadow of Mozart and Beethoven.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if I were to program something, I mean, with 104 symphonies, you could program at least 3-4 different Haydn symphonies every season, and you'd be good for 30 years without repeating a single one.
And his 80 string quartets.
Yeah, I mean...
Let's start there also, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much... I mean, once in a while, I mean, you know, a lot of the time when I listen to music is in the car, when I commute, because I have time. And I discover things I don't even know existed. You know, I heard recently a Symphony No. 2 by Weber.
Oh.
I've never played a symphony by Weber. He's written at least 2.
Carl Maria von Weber.
Yeah, Carl Maria von Weber. But I'm thinking, why don't we play things like that?
Yes.
You know, instead of, I mean, and you know, and if you're talking about the Russians, I mean, we play Tchaikovsky symphonies 4, 5, and 6. I don't know how many times, you know. But I heard the other day the Seasons by Glazunov.
Oh, I don't know.
It's beautiful music, and I'm thinking, you know, we play Sherazade a lot, of course, it's great music, but why don't once in a while we play something like that? I mean, this is wonderful music.
I had a friend who was a violinist who played at the Met. He said, I can't tell you how many times I've killed Carmen. But I love Carmen, and clearly it's a lot more complicated for an opera company to stage something different than it is for the symphony orchestra to pull the parts out.
Oh, you could do so many So many things.
And
But you know, it has, and certainly in a city like New York, where there's such a vast public, I'm sure people would love to hear new things.
Yes, curious. People are
Cur-
very
yeah,
curious here.
yeah.
Many different audiences.
Right, and I mean, and not just new music, but music from 19th century composers that is not known, or 20th century composers. I mean, Stravinsky, we always played Firebird, Petrushka, Rite of Spring. Of course, they're masterpieces, but he's written so much more, and that we seldom play. You know, it's a shame. I think there's no reason for it.
Well, you have to be running something.
Yeah, I would love to be in an orchestra where there's a committee made up of musicians, you know, some of those co-op orchestras, where they decide on programming, and they even hire the guest conductors. You know, whoever is good at something, say, let's get this person to come and do this.
Suggest that at the Philharmonic. See what happens.
What other instruments that you play? I saw you playing the trump.
The what?
Oh, see, what?
The trumpet, you said, your father played.
Yeah.
Yeah, or when I was 6 years old. I mean, for many years now, I've just concentrated on the flute. But as a kid, I played the saxophone, I played the clarinet, I played the recorder, I played the trumpet, but not anymore. We tried to master one.
That's enough, right?
Yeah.
To learn
Yeah.
and to do all that you do.
Yeah.
It's amazing, Robert. And you're also a father of many children, right? How many kids do you have?
I don't have kids.
You don't?
No.
Why did I? Is it your wife?
She has 2 kids.
2 kids.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But you see, from how many students do you have along, say, the last 10 years?
Oh, it's hard to tell. I know this coming year in the fall, I'm going to have 9 students, which is a lot. It has varied from between 5 and 8 a year. But I also do a class in Canada, a master class in the summer, where I'll get 12 students. So and a lot of them, some of them come back, but a lot of them are new ones. So it's hard to tell. From the summer, 10 years, I would say maybe 75, 80 students, different ones.
There's a trial or what? If I want to be your student, what should I do?
Well, it depends. If you want to come to the summer master class, you have to send a recording, and then I pick 12 people for the week to play in the master class. For the schools here, you have to audition. In the spring, they have entrance auditions. People first have to we do pre-screening, so they have to send a recording by December 1st. And we'll listen to maybe 80 to 100 recordings, and then we'll invite about between 40 and 50 people to audition live. And then it's however many spots. A school like Juilliard limits its wind classes to 12 students. So if 3 students graduate, then the 3 spots open for the next year. If 6 of them graduate, there's 6. Sometimes there's only 1. It varies from.
Do you teach elsewhere or just at Juilliard?
At Manhattan School
That's
as
what I
well.
thought.
Yeah.
But of your students, do you remember 1 or 2 that become, let's say, a famous guy?
Well, I mean, some of them I'm very proud that they've won orchestral positions. We've just hired a new associate principal in the Philharmonic, and she was a student at Manhattan School.
Ah, and what's her name?
Alison Fierst is her
I
name.
haven't heard of her.
She's starting in the next few weeks. with
Exciting.
Philharmonic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the second flute player is a former student also from Manhattan School. And I have students who play. I have 2 who play in the Chicago Symphony. I have 1 who plays in the Los Angeles Philharmonic, 1 in the LA Chamber Orchestra, 1 in Dallas Symphony, in different orchestras around the country. Yeah.
You're populating the orchestras.
I'm trying to contribute to
But
the
you are.
future.
They're lucky. They're lucky to have studied with you and then to be in those positions. The orchestras are lucky. It's handing it down, the tradition.
Now, I will ask you to send a message to the guys, and boys and girls that want or pretend to be a musician, what they should do, what it is.
Work hard. Practice every day. Listen to your teacher. Very important.
But work hard.
Yeah, I think you work hard all your life. You know, and I think it's like that in any profession. I mean, somebody who's a doctor, constantly has to
Keep learning.
keep learning,
Keep up with it.
and I think to be successful, you have to work hard. There's no easy way out. Talent alone is not enough.
No.
But you told me that you still learn. You
Yeah.
still continue to study and to learn. What the difference are between in the beginning and now?
Well, hopefully I know more now than I did at the
I know you do.
Let's say you lose less time to understand a thing or what?
Yeah, I think over the years, you familiarize yourself with the language of a composer. And you start, at first everything is, is so much, and then gradually you start, understanding what the differences are, and the more you hear from a composer, the more familiar it becomes, and it's years. It's a lifetime of, but that's what makes it so interesting. Because if you knew everything by the time you're 25, you'd be bored. I mean, what would you do the rest of your time?
And Tamino's music, do you know that by heart? That.
I don't. Is it Tamino, the one who goes?
Where he goes off looking for Pamina. That's I made Hinner of I'm
Yeah.
Right. That's Papageno's art.
Oh, that's Papageno.
But
Okay.
Tamino has a flute solo.
Or the one he goes. That one.
That's Papageno's tone.
Oh.
There's one more.
Oh yeah. That's
yes,
that's
very
that,
slow and melodious and
that's
beautiful.
Tamino. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
That's it. There's happy, cheery music.
Yeah. So that's Tamino. Okay.
That's Tamino.
I mean, I've played the opera, but it's been a while, so I'm.
But it's
They're
amazing
all mixed
that you're not mixed up. I was mixed up when I said it was the
What
flute and harp thing.
You know what's interesting is that Mozart has left duets for two flutes. The magic flute for two flutes.
Oh,
Himself, he did the arrangement.
wow.
And there's like 17 different numbers.
I'd like to hear those.
Oh yeah, that's something we
We should
remember
do.
some years ago I had suggested that I wanted to do that at one of the concerts at the lake with students. And for
Yes.
some reason, there was a conflict that the students here and at orchestra rehearsals, and they couldn't do it.
Let's do it.
But yeah, that's something we could do
We-
maybe next year if it's not too late for your
The
your
season is planned, but
It's planned.
we should talk about it because
Yeah.
Joe Robinson, we did a thing called Handing the Torch Down,
Yeah.
and he played with some of his students.
Uh-huh.
We could call it Handing the whatever you want.
Yeah,
But
sure.
that would be wonderful.
Yeah, because I have some good students now. That would be-
Marvelous. That would
Yeah.
be great.
I mean, yeah, we could do the 17 and they could take turns.
Just
Like-
say when you want to do it, and we'll. Well, and what else you would, whatever you want to put together, that kind of a program.
Sure, yeah.
And whenever he plays, it's sold out. They all want to come over. Then 15 of his students want to come.
That's right. It's always difficult to get tickets because there's no room.
I was going to be say one last question about what do you think it should be the future of music or the orchestras or
Well, I think the future should be that in schools, in grade school, that everybody has music classes. Everybody is exposed to music, because I think that's something you develop a taste for, but you have to be exposed to it. Because some years ago now, it's been, I don't know, 20, maybe more years when they started cutting music classes in schools. Several generations of students have never been exposed to classical music. No. And that's part of the problem that they're having now with audiences diminishing for a lot of events, because there's no public. A lot of those people who have had music classes will have played, in grade school or in high school, in the orchestra or in the band, and the majority of them probably have not become musicians, but because they develop a taste for it, they've gone to concerts. But if over the last 20 years, or I don't remember how long it's been, but it's been quite a while,
longer,
maybe
right?
longer, that they've canceled music classes. Those kids don't know who Mozart is, and never heard it.
No.
They don't.
We have a little program called Classic Cool. Reggie sends some of the artists into schools around here.
I remember.
And we want to increase that program.
Yeah.
There was one school right here behind Lincoln Center. Nobody ever talked to them. Nobody ever sent anybody in. Right here, of all places in the world.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done that way. Oh yeah, that's.
Well, thank you so much, Robert, for your time.
My pleasure.
Everything that you had to say.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And we have to continue. You have somebody coming in a minute, and I have a student coming at 5.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to show you something while you're. My little Yona that goes to the